Her new book, Everyday Women, Extraordinary Lives, highlights the inspiring stories of these remarkable women. She celebrates the strength and resilience in overcoming significant challenges with stability and grace. This book showcases their impact within their communities, and it emphasizes their contributions to their family and relationships. Charmaine is a retired teacher. She taught at Line Mountain. She has also worked closely with young adults with disabilities, and she has been actively engaging with readers through appearances at local libraries, and she was recently featured on Channel 27 on Good Day PA. So please join me in welcoming Charmaine.
Thank you, Andrea, and thanks for being here. And apparently you've noticed by now, today, March 8th, is International Women's Day, as I look out at mostly men here. So, can anyone tell me, I was a teacher, so I'm going to ask you some questions. Can anyone tell me why I added the ferns to this slide?
Fossils and coal?
Say that again, Andrea?
Mike said
Oh, I'm sorry. I just saw that.
Was there fossils and coal?
Yes. You win a prize just for
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Come on down.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, so I want class participation. Coal was formed from ferns and plants 200 to 400 million years ago. So, before we hear about the women, because that's what we're here for, to hear about these extraordinary women, but first I think we need to learn a little bit about coal. I lived, of course, most of my life in the coal region, and I will tell you, especially before doing this book, I didn't really know a whole lot about coal. We didn't really learn about it that much in school either. I knew about anthracite coal was hard coal, bituminous coal was soft coal, and of course, anthracite was better. I since did a posting on You Know You're From Shamokin When, and I mentioned that. I said, I never really learned that much about coal. And several people did reply, and there were 2 teachers who apparently did get into it quite a bit, but I really did not. Going into Shamokin, on Route 61 South, you're welcomed by this big banks of coal. But it isn't actually coal, it's calm, which is the byproduct that you don't really burn. This is the Glenburn Colliery, one of the largest collieries in the area, and there were many, many different collieries all over. And this is my view from where I grew up. The other side of that mountain is what you had just seen. And again, picture's much bigger back here. I took the picture actually.
It's on.
There it is, okay. Up above, this was also a hill, and that was our view growing up. Do you see this tiny little lot here? Okay. This expands. This tiny little lot was a small double house, and on the left side of the double house was our grocery store, and on the right side was where Alfie and Mary Sodden lived, and this, the little neighborhood stores run throughout many of the stories about the women. So that was my view. Question time.
And that's Shamokin.
This is Shamokin. Yes. Impressed?
I've been through many times.
Where in the entire world is the most anthracite coal?
Right around here, you have 3 fields that I know
So,
of.
you're,
When I say right around here, eastern Pennsylvania.
exactly. And just like that, you won a prize.
Thank you.
And it's very good. We used to have this great store called the Fun Shop, and you could get coal candy, and it was like hard licorice. It's very hard to find anymore. These are actually chocolate, and I keep them in the fridge. And then my husband goes, and they're actually pretty good, surprisingly. So there you go. Where is most of the anthracite coal mined today? What country?
China.
She gets a prize. And she just came in.
Thank you. Oh, cool.
The coal region of northeastern Pennsylvania in the United States has the largest known deposits of anthracite coal in the world, with an estimated reserve of 7 billion short tons. So we have the most. China accounts for the majority of global production. So from the time that I was growing up in the 50s and the 60s, coal production started going down and the price of coal was going up. In our country, I have to use this because I just bought this special. I love a pointer. If you can see that little red, do we see where I'm pointing? A little red, oh, our laser up there, right there. Thank you very much, Andrea. That's the largest anthracite coal deposits in the world. Yes. The rest of the coal that you see is bituminous, lignite, or subbituminous. And here are the counties that have coal. And most of the anthracite coal that Bethlehem Steel used, I believe, they got from Lackawanna County. And probably other places too, but I did read from Lackawanna County. They used anthracite coal and then eventually switched to bituminous. I might be incorrect on some of this, but we all know.
Would this be easier with the pointer, or do you like your new one?
Well, you can assist me with the
No,
pointer.
no, no. Just in case you need it.
Okay, okay.
Knighted.
Oh, Kathy, I'll put you in charge of this, or show me how to. Okay. Okay, I got it. I figured it out. Okay, we all know that coal mining was backbreaking work. And you can see with this gentleman, he's actually bent over. Another thing that was very prevalent was the breaker boys who had to pick slate and sticks and anything that wouldn't burn out of the coal. My dad actually worked as a breaker boy. And here's another picture of breaker boys. Oops. Never mind, that one's out. And here are some actual lanterns and helmets that the coal miners did use. And I took this picture at Knoebels Amusement Resort. If you've ever been there, they have this very good coal mining museum. And you can see this and many other things. And one thing that I've always found fascinating at this coal mining museum is this, it is in a booklet form now. Before, it was actually loose leaf papers that anybody going through could just look at some mishaps that the miners had. And I'm so glad that they finally covered it and put it in a binder, because everybody was going by just with their hands and looking through. And you see how thick this is. And then another picture I took of it, just because of being a teacher, and you can't, I don't know if you can see really well, but the cursive handwriting was just beautiful, phenomenal. Now they actually have a little computer device where you can go into the miner's name. Here we have a Polish citizen, a married miner. This is in 1924. He was killed while drilling out a missed hole in the face of a heading. Charge exploded while he was drilling it. And you know what happened? Why this happened? Carelessness of victim. It was almost always the miner's fault. This 50-year-old miner, while working on the face of a breast, John Konovich opened a safety lamp to light a cigarette, and he lit some gas, which burned Leshevitz so bad, he died on the 29th. So this happened on the 23rd. Very painful. This 41-year-old single miner had his foot crushed, necessitating amputation when he was caught between a prop and some loose rock that he was burning down. And the last word, it was avoidable, so it was his fault. And throughout that notebook, it was, like I had said, almost always the miner's fault. This is an actual sign that was in the mines. Safety rules weren't meant for me. And if you notice, let's see if I can get this working here. Waiter. The undertaker is taking the measurements of this miner, because that's what's going to happen if he's not using his safety rules. Time for a bonus question. What animal was thought more of by the mine owners than the miners themselves? What was the most valuable animal?
Donkey. I think you got it.
Mule.
The donkey, right. They treated the donkeys very well. Has anybody ever heard that if you left anthracite coal around for a long, long time, it would turn into diamonds? Who's heard that? Is it true or not?
Under certain conditions, you just can't set it. It won't turn into a diamond, but under the right weight and pressure, it could.
I've always heard this myself. Myth. Diamonds are formed from coal. As I mentioned earlier, anthracite coal formed about 300 to 400 million years ago. And because of the plant substance on them, diamonds are pure carbon. They were formed about 1 to 3 billion years ago. So because of that, they're saying it is a myth. Okay, so are we all up on our coal information now? I just want to give you a little background there. to wait for this part to close.
Can you clarify if it's not coal? It says diamonds are not formed from coal. So what are they formed by?
It says pure carbon,
Oh,
that there's no other material.
so what was pure carbon?
Well, I come from the Canal Museum now, and we talk about that. They don't really form from coal, but the material that created both of them was under tremendous weight, pressure,
Pressure.
and heat under the ground. So from what you said, and I believe you, the diamonds, time-wise, were formed before these coal, but the carbon came from the biological material that sunk into the swamps of the time. You're talking several hundred million years ago. But
Had billions,
right,
billions.
her question is correct. It's the same material created it, but one thing didn't lead to another.
Right.
Like what we do with our kids when they come through, we show them examples of the different kind of coal. Now, you start with peat, lignite, bituminous, and then the anthracite. They don't necessarily form one after the other, but they would over a period of time from the same material.
Right, you're talking millions of years.
Correct.
It's hard to fathom.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why diamonds are deep mining operation, is that correct?
Yeah, sure. They were
Much
there
deeper than
because
coal.
of the yeah. So technically, I completely agree with her. Coal didn't turn into diamonds, but they come from the same kind of material under heat and pressure over long periods of time. Periods of time people can't even imagine.
More pressure.
Yeah.
Okay, now we'll get into the book and how did the book begin. The last couple years of my mom's life, my mom was very independent, and she lived in her own home, and she drove until she was 95 years old. And then her body started finally breaking down on her a little bit. So I basically moved in with her. I lived very close, just a mile away. And after she died at 97, I was thinking, she died in May, and the summer was very busy and selling her house and doing all those things. And it was the fall, and I'm thinking, well, you know, here comes winter, what am I going to do? And I decided, I think I'm, going to write some things down about my mom. Then I was with my girlfriends at a Christmas dinner from high school, and we've stayed close friends. And there were 8 of us, and of the 8 of us from Shamokin, 4 of us had mothers that were in their 90s. My mother was the last to pass. My other friend's mother was 95 and 96 and 98. So that got me thinking, have you ever heard of the blue zones in the world? Areas of the world where people seem to have longer lives. In California, Costa Rica, Sardinia, Italy, Greece, and Japan. I was thinking, what about the Anthracite region of Shamokin? I know a lot of women who've lived into their 90s. So I started writing about my mom. And what I wrote was really not very good. You can ask Kathy. The first thing I wrote basically just kind of sounded like an obituary, and that wasn't what I was going for at all. I just wanted to get like the essence of my mom. We were always very close, and we didn't argue like very much at all. The biggest argument I think we had was when I let my hair go white, because she just thought that was awful. She'd never let her hair go white. So thinking about this, all these women who are in the book, for the most part, except the 2 on the top, you could actually walk to their houses. I'm thinking this area has a lot of ladies in their 90s. And there were others. There are other people that I talked to who for some reason or other didn't want their mothers included, or a woman I talked to who was actually my mom's cousin, and she said, no, she said, times were just so hard then, I don't want to even think about it. So I went with my notebook and I met with the women, or I met with their family members, and basically for each person that I was writing about, I would pretty much get 2 pages of notes. For one lady, I got 4 pages of notes. But I just wrote down little bits and pieces, and then from what I remembered, I would write it up, and of course I would have them review it and make sure it was something that they wouldn't mind is published. And I start, of course, with my mother, and this is my mom, Audrey, and that's a picture of her when she was 90 years old. Audrey was a pretty feisty kid. She was one of 6 children, and she had 5 brothers. As a child, one of the little stories I have in there is she and her friends went to the Victoria Theater, known as the Vicky. I think she paid something like $0.25, if it was even that much. And when you went, I think during the weekday, you got a piece of depression glass that you could take home. And her mom, Verna, said, please make sure you bring this glass home, because she was having a collection of dinnerware. When Audrey got out of the theater, it was winter, it was cold, she didn't have gloves on. Guess what? Her hands were so cold, she just took that dish and she flung it into the Shamokin Creek. So much for the dish. That was my mom. Things went pretty well for my mom until when she was 16 years old, her mother died. And at that time, of course, the wakes were held in the house. Soon after, her father remarried. He married a German immigrant named Hetty, and she came to Shamokin, and now she's the matron of the house. And almost right away, she took a dislike to my mom. First thing she did is take all the pictures down in the house of my mother's mother, Verna. Then she accused my mom of stealing her jewelry and stockings. So Audrey kind of knew she wasn't wanted there. Oh, and one thing that I wanted to say before I mention that was when my mother went for her first days of high school, her father and oldest brother decided that a girl did not need to go to school. So she had to quit school. And then she went to a well-known factory in Shamokin called Schroyer's, and they made dresses. So that was actually before Hetty came on the scene. So anyway, she went to live with her mother's sister and her cousins. They didn't have much room. If you've seen the houses in Shamokin, most of them are very small. There were 3 of them sleeping in the same bed. And she worked all day sewing at Schroyer's. And her cousin said to her one day, did she want to go skating at Edgewood Park? Now, Edgewood Park was this big amusement park at the edge of town. And Audrey said, no, I don't want to go skating. I worked all day and I'm tired. But somehow they persuaded her to go skating. And here, I wanted to show you, this is the roller coaster at Edgewood Park. And this was known as the Scenic. I think it looks pretty cool. And here is the skating rink at Edgewood. And this is where she met my father. And they got married in 1947. She met him, and he was in the Navy. They sent my father to Point Barrow, Alaska. This was near the end of the Second World War, because his brother had already died and was buried in Normandy. And I think by that time they tried to put soldiers somewhere, a little safer. Did you take note of the wedding cake? His sister made it for them. Got a little lopsided. At the age of 57, my mother became a widow. And after that, I would say this part of her life, when I look back at it, I'm thinking it showed how dependent she was on men, them making her quit school and so on, and work in the factory. My mother never learned to drive. Within 6 weeks of my dad dying, she had her license, and off Audrey went for the rest, for another 40 years. And that's all I'll say about her right now. So she had another eventful 40 years. This woman, Shirley Welker, she grew up on Treverton Road, which was outside of Shamokin. Started out like on a farm. She and her friends were outside and they were rolling up corn silk, and they decided to smoke it. Her dad caught her smoking the corn silk, and what he did as punishment was make her smoke all of the rolls that she had. Now, her dad was one of the few certified electricians in the area. Cheryl was born, my mother was born in 1926, and Cheryl was born around that time too. Her mother was 49 years old when she had Cheryl, and she and her husband already had 3 children who were grown and older, the youngest being 19. The father, as I said, was an electrician, because I'm trying to do the math here in my head, and actually helped Thomas Edison put in the electric lights at St. Edward's Church in Shamokin. So I'm thinking, how could that be? Because now we're back in the 1800s. But I guess it could be possible because they said he was even much older than the mother. St. Edward's is known to be the first church with electric lights, and when I investigated about that, they also said that there's a church in England that has that notoriety. But it's the first church with the 3-prong system, which is what we use, St. Edward's, which is now with jointure, and it's called Mother Cabrini Church, if you ever go there. Cheryl was a lot of fun, and she ended up marrying her husband here, Ned. In the 1950s, Cheryl and her husband bought a cottage at Knoebels Amusement Park. Anybody here ever to Knoebels? Okay. A year after they bought this cottage, they lived in Shamokin, but they also had this cottage. Cheryl was having headaches and just not feeling very well. They had a daughter, Karen, my friend, who was 3 years old at the time, and Cheryl was diagnosed with polio. At the time, they decided to send her through the March of Dimes to Warm Springs, Georgia, and of course you know about that with FDR. Can anyone tell me who came up with the phrase March of Dimes? This one's a little bit of a toughie. We think of it with FDR, because he was a member of the association that was fighting polio. And this would be Eddie Cantor. He was a vaudeville performer and actor, and then he had a radio program. And he said, let's have a march of dimes to fight polio. And they were inundated, the White House was inundated with dimes. The Warm Springs treatment pools in Georgia, the water temp is a constant 88 degrees. Cheryl was there for 9 months. Later in her life, she was bedfast from post-polio syndrome, but after her time in Warm Springs, she was doing better and she had jobs. And she's a very happy person. Even when she was bedfast, she was so sweet to everybody and kind to her caretakers and so on. Next we have Mitzi Cosmer. When I started writing this chapter, it was really confusing. Mitzi's mother was an immigrant from Austria. She was coming by boat. She was an only child. And on her way on the ocean, she was so deathly sick that the authorities eventually moved her up to a higher deck because she was that sick. So she was an only child, as I said. So when she got married, this is Mitzi's mother, and Mitzi's mother was named Marie. Mitzi is also Marie. Mitzi had 6 children, one of them named Marie, and another one named Mary. So it was kind of confusing for me at first to keep all, and I'm sure this is why she went by Mitzi. Mitzi, I believe, was the oldest of 10 children. So her mother, who was an only child, had 10 children. Her husband was a coal miner, and he died at 46. When Mitzi married the love of her life, she decided she would like to have her own store. Now, Mitzi also, you heard me mention Schroyer's dress shop factory. Besides helping her mother take care of the kids, she also worked at Schroyer's dress factory. But she always wanted to be a storekeeper. In her entire life of 93 years, Mitzi always lived within a 1-block radius. She had a store, and it was called Mitzi's. And the store was well known in her neighborhood. And on special days, she would have torpedo hoagies, and they were 10 cents. So when word got out that she was making hoagies that day, they would be lined up around the block. I mentioned before about Edgewood Park. This was the Edgewood Hotel, and this was back in the trolley days, so we're talking back in the 20s. I think the trolley stopped like in the 30s. And my next lady, Sally Lauer, she lived many places in the Shamokin area, but one of the places she lived at was just near across the street from the Edgewood Hotel. By the time, while she was growing up, the hotel was no longer functioning as a hotel, but she said many evenings the guys would be on the porch playing all kinds of card games, dice, and whatever. Here is Sally in the 50s with a good friend of hers. and it was Easter, and I even remember this slightly growing up. On Easter Sunday, there was the Easter parade when you were to go downtown dressed in all your Easter finery, and you just walked up and down the main street showing off your attire. And here with her husband, Norm, Sally and Norm were both very, very active in theater productions of the area. Sally was kind of an outlier of the 10 women that I wrote about, because when she went to high school, she was in everything. She was one of those people who just did everything. She was a cheerleader, she was in nurses club, even though she didn't want to be a nurse, but just anything. Oh, she was also in the Civil Air Patrol, and they would have assignments, and they'd have to go up on this hill and report all the planes that they saw go by. She even remembered her code word. I said, well, what would you do if there was a plane or danger? She didn't know, but she just had a lot of fun doing it. She was awarded a scholarship and a senatorial scholarship, and went to Temple University, where she became a pharmacist. And she became a pharmacist in 4 years, which was the time frame. While she was going to school, she was a senior in college. She had her first child. Her husband was working elsewhere. Her good friend wanted to be with her to support her. So the good friend went into a uniform closet, put on some scrubs. The other medical personnel just thought she was a student doctor or whatever. So her friend was actually in with her for her birth. Sally will be 90 this May, and very, very active. Just now, I would say, she's having some physical problems, but just so active. They say at church she did everything but preach. She was just, in charge of everything. She's in 3 book clubs, and she plays mahjong. Usually her 4 kids, they really can't find her because she's always on the go. She also lived, besides the hotel, this was the Edgewood Pool. Do you remember the Edgewood Pool, or was it closed?
It was closed.
This swimming pool is said to be the largest swimming pool in the state of Pennsylvania. It was concrete, and the water came from a mountain stream. And I can't believe this because it is such a big pool. They would drain it on Sunday nights and refill it. And I said to Sally, are you sure they completely? I remember them at least lowering, they would clean the sides and so on. It didn't have filtering systems like today's pools. And she said, no, she said they emptied it because, they would watch them empty the pool and clean it up. I went to the Edgewood Pool all the time, and even on the hottest days, you would not ever be bothered by the crowds because it was so big. And actually, when I went, this part wasn't there, so you can imagine just how big that swimming pool was. Phalathea. It's a good friend of mine, her mother, just a wonderful, kind lady. Phalathea's mother died when Phalathea was 1 year old. Her mother was 30 years old and died of the Spanish flu. Shamokin was hit very hard by the Spanish flu. The sailors were on a ship from Boston to Philadelphia. 600 of them had the Spanish flu. They got off the ship and were doing their westward track to their homes, and apparently quite a few must have been in the coal region. In one night, over 30 people died in Shamokin. And in a short amount of time, close to 400 people died of the Spanish flu. Edgewood Park, that I showed you, the skating rink, there was a dance pavilion, and they were using that as an auxiliary hospital. Phalathea graduated from school, from high school. She was very active with her alumni association, and the Shamokin High School Alumni Association is said to be the oldest association in the country. She went on to help her husband with his businesses. She was a bookkeeper. At one time, he was part owner of a furniture store, and she would help there with displays and so on. And they did have some tragedies in their life, as you'll see with most of the women, and people, is just like how they would handle it. They have a business in Mount Carmel. My good friend Luann is actually the president of Academy Sports Center, and this was founded by her mother and father. Gert. It was really fun meeting Gert. Those stairs were part of a WPA project. And this was last year when I went to visit her in her apartment. Gert quit school on her own. She was anxious to get to the factory. There were other girls she knew who were at the factory, so she went to Schroyer's factory. You hear, a lot of the same names again. She could do anything at the factory, any part of the sewing process. When people went on vacation or if they were sick, she could fill in. She had a tough time after a bit. She was married. She had one daughter. In a 4-year period, she lost her father 1 year, her mother the next year. The following year, her husband, who had a car garage, was working on a car. The gas tank exploded and killed him. And the following year, her only brother died. And yet, the spirit of this woman, that's what got me. She's just really spirited and happy. Later in life, her only daughter was diagnosed and then eventually died of cancer. Gert, unfortunately, a few months after I met her and wrote about her, she ended up in a nursing home. And I took the book to her. The book had come out, and I wanted to give it to her. I'm so glad I got to, because unfortunately she died very soon afterwards. But Gert said, "Oh, I'm a celebrity." So, the Coney Island is famous in Shamokin, and every year her niece would take her to the Coney Island for her birthday. She said she didn't even really like it that much, but it was just tradition. If you go in the Coney Island today, if you want to go, to a living museum, go to the Coney Island, because I believe it's 106 years old now. If you go in, I think it's the same countertop and it's the same stools. They serve hot dogs and hamburgers, and that's it, with or without special chili sauce or onions. That's what they served over 100 years ago and what they still serve. Barbara Parker married an Air Force man. They moved to Texas. Then he was reassigned to Japan. She came back to the area and worked in a silk mill. She was always a worker. When she retired from her secretarial job at retirement age, she went to work at the Bon-Ton department store. You know the Bon-Ton? The Bon-Ton finally left the mall, but she was given, and she was in her 70s at the time, she was given a lifetime credit to use, percentage off that for everything, except the Bon-Ton is hardly around anymore. This is Louise Eubler. Louise was a good student. She graduated from high school, and she lived close to the Eagle Silk Mill. This factory, you can see, is really very large. 379,000 square feet. It employed 6,000 people. My mother, in her later years, worked at the Oxford dress factory in this building. Arrow Shirt Factory was here also. I worked at the Arrow Shirt Factory with a very fast, powerful machine. And let me tell you, I was a lousy sewer. Most of the collar bands of the shirts that I sewed ended up back in my basket again, and I would have to rip them out and do them over. The National Ticket Company was located in the Eagle Building. National Ticket Company was the largest ticket company in the entire world. If you go to a Broadway show, you turn it over, you would see National Ticket. They're still around. The building no longer is there, of course. Joan Wagner. Her mother made that crochet dress. Isn't it beautiful? And she's a beautiful bride. Joan was a stay-at-home mom. It was really also a lot of fun meeting and talking with Joan, although she does have Alzheimer's right now. But she could remember a lot of things from years ago. Especially that there was this really cute girl in their Bible study group that all the boys liked. So she wasn't too crazy about her. And last is my mother-in-law. I included her. She's from the Scranton area. Her husband at one time worked in the mines. And what can I say about Betty, Elizabeth? Well, here's a cute little story. She did have, during the Second World War, she had this boyfriend who was overseas, and while he was overseas, she met Jim Welby, and they fell in love. So when the boyfriend came back, and he was ready to propose, and she had to say, sorry, I found somebody else. Of course, he wasn't very happy, and he went to the nearest corner bar, and he was drowning his sorrows. And he was telling the guy next to him about what had happened. And guess what? You know who that guy was? Jim Welby. Okay, so Betty and her husband Jim had some children, Anne Marie, and then their son Jim, and their son Tom, and Becky, and Joan, and my husband Bob, and Gerard, and Paul, and Maureen, and Mary, and Kathy, and Raymond. Were you counting? 13 children. They had 13 children. At one point, they didn't have a lot of money, believe it or not. At one point, the house they were living in caught on fire and was destroyed. And then Jim was diagnosed with leukemia and died at 46 years old. So now Betty has the 13 children. The oldest, Anne-Marie, is now married and on her own, and her son Jim is in the Navy. So now she is a mother on her own with 11 children. And I will say, the family just adored her, think most highly of her, and that's why I helped include her in the book. Here's a pretty picture of Shamokin with the snow cover. And now I have one other bonus question to kind of finish off. And Kathy, this is a musical question. Oh, actually I have two questions. See if you know the name of the song for some delicious coal candy. Musician? It's old. From the 1920s. I know we weren't around then. Okay, we stumped them.
Is there a song about Edgewood Park from that time period?
Good guess. The song is named Charmaine. That's me. When my mother was young, she was walking by and she heard this mother say to her daughter in the yard, "Come in, Charmaine, time to come in." And she just really liked the name. And that song is Charmaine, Mantovani Orchestra, and the new Guy Lombardo made it big with the song. It was a big hit back in the time. Okay, so I have one last trivia question for you. Not directly related to anything, but I just think it's a fun trivia question. For those of you who've been to Knoebels, or even if you haven't, this is Knoebels band shell, and a well-known singer sang at this band shell, probably many of them, but this is a very big time singer who was at Knoebels.
Taylor Swift?
Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, and give the guy a prize. Well, thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed hearing a little history of coal and about these women. And thanks.
Thank you.